November 1971, Pacific Northwest. A man calling himself Dan Cooper hijacked a Northwest Orient 727, took 200 grand in 20s, lowered the rear stairs in flight, and jumped into a storm. Gone. No trace. They closed the case in 2016. I didn't. He bought the ticket in Portland under the name Dan Cooper. One way to Seattle, $18. Dark suit, black clip-on tie, white shirt, cheap raincoat. He looked like middle management after a bad quarter. One carry-on bag, one paper sack. No one remembered panic. Florence Schaffner worked the aisle that afternoon. Young flight attendant. Sharp eyes. He handed her a note. She thought it was a phone number. He leaned close and told her to read it. The cabin smelled of coffee and cigarette smoke. That changed the air. Tina Mucklow sat with him longer. She carried messages between Cooper and the cockpit, close enough to see his hand stay steady. He ordered bourbon and soda, paid his tab, polite, controlled. The thing is, courtesy can feel colder than rage when the bomb is real. Portland gave him the stage, Seattle gave him leverage. Thanksgiving week traffic, wet tarmac, low clouds pressed over the field. Northwest Flight 305 was a routine hop until it wasn't. A short route helps a hijacker. Less time for doubt, more time for surprise. The airplane mattered. Boeing 727-100. Rear ventral stairs. A built-in exit no other jet offered quite the same way. He knew enough to ask for flaps at 15 degrees and gear down after takeoff from Seattle. Short fragment. Then the part that mattered. He knew the machine. The weather turned mean. Rain hammered the fuselage. Wind shear worked the air. Night covered the woods below in one flat black sheet. Somewhere between Ariel and the Lewis River, a man opened the back end of a jetliner and stepped out into that. I kept the photocopy of the note under amber light. The original was gone, lost after transcription. The file said he wrote he had a bomb and wanted 48 hours to do nothing foolish. Missing paper bothered me more than the threat. The witness sketches sat clipped together with rusted metal. Olive skin, maybe. Mid-40s. Thin lips. Dark eyes. Hair neatly combed. The record says average build. The record lies. Every witness drew the same thing, harder to file away. Calm. Professional. Like this wasn't his first tight room. The timeline from Seattle came clean and ugly. Ransom delivered by employee car to the plane. 4 parachutes delivered too. Passengers released. Crew kept. Refuel complete. Wheels up again at 7:40 p.m. toward Mexico City by way of Reno. He stayed behind the curtain with Tina and the money. At 8:13 p.m., the cockpit logged a sudden pressure bump. The kind a crew feels when weight shifts or stairs deploy.
No one saw him leave. No one heard a scream. Just instrument changes in cold air where a passenger used to be. The official version stayed plain. Cooper took the money, selected a parachute, tied the bank bag to himself somehow, and jumped near the Washington state line.
The Bureau treated the landing zone like a wound in the forest. Agents combed mud, fir needles, riverbanks. They said he probably died on impact or in the river. Street shoes, business suit, November weather, rough timber country, a reserve parachute that may have been sewn shut for training. It was a clean answer, maybe too clean. Dead men usually leave a piece of themselves behind. Years passed. Suspects came and went like cigarette smoke in a squad room. Richard McCoy, Dwayne Weber, Kenneth Christensen, Robert Rackstraw. Each name hit the papers. Then slipped. No prints matched. No body turned up. No confession stood on its own legs. In 2016, the FBI shut the active investigation. Resources, priorities, age of the case, standard language on stale paper. They kept the physical evidence for future DNA work. That was the public line. Some cases stay cold for a reason.
Paper can freeze a lot of mistakes in place.
The first crack sat in his tie. Black clip-on JCPenney brand. They recovered it on seat 18E. Decades later, particles on it suggested titanium and rare earth elements. Industrial trace. Maybe aerospace, maybe chemical processing, maybe contamination. Still, Office Drifter started looking thinner.
Then there was the parachute choice.
He left behind a better sport chute and took an older civilian rig. He also took a dummy reserve with no usable canopy. That read two ways. Either he knew nothing and got lucky, or he knew enough to select for concealment over performance. The money complicated everything. In 1980, 8-year-old Brian Ingram found $5,800 in decaying 20s on Tena Bar along the Columbia River. 3 packets. Serial numbers matched the ransom, buried in sand. The place sat far from the Bureau's favored drop zone. That's the part that doesn't add up. The flight path wasn't gospel either. Radar was patchy. Crew estimates shifted. Wind calculations changed over the years. Search maps moved like bad memories. If the jump point slid even a few miles, the ground picture changed completely. Forest became river. River became road. Road became pickup access. One theory said he lived. Military background, paratrooper training, knowledge of the 727's air stair and pressure limits. He jumped low, accepted a rough landing, cached supplies, and walked out through logging roads. There were plenty then. Wet gravel, diesel stink, nobody asking late-night questions. Another theory worked closer to the water. He never meant to survive the drop clean. The money came loose or was buried later by current and dredging. Tena Bar became a message from the river, not the man. Partial recovery keeps both camps fed. That was always the trouble.
Then came the Canadian comic connection. The alias Dan Cooper matched a French-language comic book pilot who parachuted into danger. That pointed north. Maybe a Canadian airman. Maybe someone familiar with Francophone culture who knew Americans would miss the reference in 1971. Small detail, big shadow. After the headlines cooled, the crew kept living with the sound of that flight. Tina Mucklow entered a convent for a time. Schaffner kept retelling the first note.
The first look, the first shift in his voice. A hijacking ends on paper. In memory, it keeps the cabin pressurized. The Bureau returned some files, withheld others, and lost more than it ever admitted. Public releases came black-barred and thin. Private researchers filled garages with maps and suspect binders. The old hunt moved from field offices to kitchen tables. Cold coffee, scanner hum. 40 years of maybe. What I knew was simple. Men vanish, habits don't. Cooper showed planning, restraint, and enough nerve to stand inside a roaring aircraft and trust darkness more than handcuffs. I had worked enough cold cases to know absence can be evidence. It just refuses to testify clean. I kept coming back to the same picture. The rear stairs hanging open over black timber, rain on metal, cabin lights behind him. One man folding into weather and turning into a national ghost. Acted alone or had help. Pick a side and defend it. The desk stays cold. The questions don't.